This is a Christian Marriage Academy broadcast where we explore the depths of love and commitment in the context of Christian faith. The content you're about to receive is non-copyrighted material. You're allowed to share and spread the knowledge and empower others on their journey to build strong, Christ-centered marriages. And now, stay tuned for your host, Seth the teacher.
Hey, greetings you lovely people. My name is Seth, and I welcome you to our topic for today, mystery behind the marriage ceremony. Now, I'd like to start by apologizing for my loss of voice. It hasn't been easy at all, but we still get things done. So if you find my voice to be a bit different or raspy today, please forgive me. Apologies. Circumstances beyond my control. And also, I'd like to welcome all our new members for showing interest, and I remind you that the marriage vetting program will be launched soon. And if you want to know more about the vetting program, please listen to the pinned audio at the top of this group. And when you are listening, you can forward it to the part where it talks about grow. That's where the vetting program is explained. So please note that. And also, after listening to this message, feel free to ask questions in this group, and I'll gladly answer you. And if you want to ask me some personal questions, you can also do so from my personal message me button on the top of my page. So let's dive in. Now, in talking about the mystery behind the marriage ceremony, I would like to divide this topic into two main mysteries. That is, one, mystery behind the origins of marriage customs, and two, mystery of what happens spiritually in the marriage ceremony. Now, I will use this part, that is part one, to discuss the mystery behind the origins of marriage customs. Then part two will be used to tackle the mystery of what happens spiritually in the marriage ceremony. So let's begin, shall we? Now, mystery behind the origins of marriage customs. Now, I'm going to pick certain popular marital customs and talk about their mysterious origins, which very few people know about. And these are: 1. The marriage ring. 2. The white wedding gown. 3. The wedding veil. 4. Bridesmaids. 5. Best man. And the last one, 6, which is honeymoon. So these are the specific marital customs that I'm going to pinpoint and talk about their mysterious origins, and I hope you find them very interesting. So now let's begin with the marriage ring. Now, to understand the origins of the marriage ring, you should first of all understand the origins of rings in general. And so we ask yourself, when did human beings start to wear rings on their fingers? Okay, so now let's go way back in time. Wearing of rings originated in ancient Egypt about 5,000 years ago. Yeah, the Egyptian kings called pharaohs started putting rings on their fingers. But you may ask, what inspired them to do this at all? That is, putting rings on their fingers. Okay, so to answer this question, what you have to know is that in Egypt they worshipped the sun. That is the sun that we all see, sunlight, the sun. Now, they thought the sun was a god, and they worshipped it, and they called it Ra, R-A, Ra. But what is the shape of the sun? The shape of the sun is a circle, and so Egyptians loved the circle shape, or the shape of the circle. And as we know, for every god worship, they have to associate an animal with that god. which we call totem animal. Now, the totem animal they associated with their sun god Ra is the snake or the serpent. And this is why you see cobra in front of the crowns of Egyptian kings, because every idol usually has an animal associated with it. Just like how in the Bible we have Baal, who was associated with cow or bull. And in Greece, we have Zeus, who was associated with eagle, and Poseidon, who was also associated with horse. And even in our African deities, when we come to Africa, we too do the same. Like in Nigeria, we have the deity called Oba, OBA, associated with the leopard, and we have Ogun associated with dog, etc. And in Ghana, we have Anansi associated with the spider, etc., etc. So in Egypt, they associated the sun god Ra with a snake. So now, in drawing the snake to look like a circle, that is the sun, the god that they worship, they curve the snake so that its mouth comes to touch its tail, and even swallow it a bit so that it forms a perfect circle. And this sign was called Ouroboros. Ouroboros, that is O-U-R-O-B-O-R-O-S, Ouroboros. That is a snake turning its head to touch its own tail or even swallow it. It's the same thing, Ouroboros. And it formed the shape of a circle to represent the shape of the sun that they worshipped. And so in Egypt, they used to mold this Ouroboros shape and hang it around in places like their homes and their temples, etc. And they molded it often with metal. So basically a metal ring, Ouroboros, a serpent devouring its own tail. Yeah. And so as time went on, their kings decided, that is the pharaohs, they decided that, why don't we use gold to make a similar version of this Ouroboros and put it on our fingers? And that began the trend of wearing rings on their fingers. Ouroboros, that is a snake eating its own tail, inspired by the shape of the sun, that is their god that they worship. But how did the ring start to be associated with marriage? It's in this same place, Egypt, where this trend began to happen. So in Egypt, when they observed how the sun always comes up every morning and goes down every evening, and it does that all the time and never stops, they associated the shape of the sun, that is circle, with infinity or eternity, or let me say everlasting life. That is, the sun comes and it goes, it comes and it goes, comes back every day, forever and ever. It occurs, it does the same thing. So they represent it with infinity. They represent the circle, the shape of the sun, with infinity, or the concept of everlasting life. And also they observed how the circle has no beginning or end, and they associated it with eternity. So if you are drawing the circle, you see that it has no beginning and no end, and therefore you can draw it in a circular pattern, round forever. And so in Egypt, everybody knew that when you draw the shape of the circle or Ouroboros, it represented eternity or infinity. And so it came to pass that during Egyptian marriages, they started to exchange rings or Ouroboros to each other to represent eternal love. You see, so the man would give the woman a ring or an Ouroboros and say, I promise to love you forever. And the woman too will do the same and say, I promise to also love you forever. Why? Because the ring or circle or Ouroboros represented forever or eternity for them. So they say that, and they put the ring on their finger. That is their fourth finger. But why the fourth finger, you may ask yourself? It is because the Egyptians, they believed that there's a hidden vein that runs from that fourth finger and connects straight to the heart. And therefore, when you put the ring on that finger, it will help you to love each other forever, which isn't really scientifically true, but they've accepted it like that, and we still practice it today. And that is the origin of why we put rings on the finger during the marriage ceremony. However, we know that the Egyptian kingdom came to an end, right? When Alexander the Great conquered Egypt and formed, or let me say, began the Greek Empire. After that, the Greeks also adopted this custom of wedding rings, and they also applied it in their society. And later on, after the Roman Empire too came up and they conquered the Greek Empire, they too continued this tradition as well. However, the Romans took it to another level by introducing something called the engagement ring. And with the engagement ring, how it went on was that when a man saw a woman he wanted to marry, he would put a ring on her finger to mean that he now owns that woman. And therefore, all other men in that city should keep clear or keep away from that woman. So the engagement ring wasn't really a statement of love like we know it today, but more of a statement of legal ownership. And so this practice went on and on in Europe and other places, and other people started copying it as well. Yeah, so that is the marriage ring for you. Now, let's move on to the white wedding gown. Okay, so now with the white wedding gown, unlike how marriage rings originated in Egypt, the tradition of brides wearing white gown rather originated in ancient Rome. About 509 BC, that is before Christ. So in ancient Rome, brides traditionally wore a white dress known as tunica recta during their marriage ceremonies. Now, in those times, every woman who married was a virgin, and so they used the color white to represent their purity and virginity. But now, speaking about the dress itself, that is the wedding gown, the tunica recta itself, let's note this fact. The people of Rome too had their own gods and goddesses that they worshipped, like Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Mercury, etc. They had even plenty more deities even than Egyptians. But there's one particular goddess called Juno. This is the same goddess after whom the month June was named. So if you hear June, you know that June was named after the goddess Juno, G-U-N-O. She's called Juno, and she's the goddess said to be the goddess of marriage and childbirth. And most notably, this Juno goddess is regarded as the goddess of women, and their protection. That is the protection of women. That is the goddess who is in charge of that, according to the Romans. And her husband is Zeus. I think we've all heard of Zeus, that guy. Yeah. Now, this goddess Juno was regarded by the Romans as the mother of all the gods and the queen of heaven. Does that sound quite familiar? Right, but I don't want to go into it. And this goddess Juno was often depicted wearing a long white gown with a veil covering the back of her head instead of covering her face, but with a covering of the face with the veil. We'll talk about it in the next point. Now, the wearing of the long white gown by Roman brides was associated with this Roman goddess Juno, and was done as a way to honor her and seek her blessings for a fruitful marriage, because she is the goddess in charge of marriage and she is in charge of women. She is a goddess of women and childbirth. And so, like the rest of the gods and goddesses, her totem, this Juno, her totem animal was the peacock. And this is why The bride's wedding dress is made very long to drag on the ground, just like how a peacock's tail feather sweeps the ground when it drops it down instead of opening it. So next time when you see a long wedding gown, remember Juno, the goddess of marriage. That is her dress, and the dress is meant to honor her and seek her her approval and her blessing for the future marriage. However, because white dresses were expensive and difficult to maintain in those days when there was no soap like we have today, wearing this type of white dress for weddings gradually faded from the system until 1844. Please note this. Until 1844, this trend was a bit dormant, and women, or let me say brides, used to wear any attire at all, apart from the color white. But in 1840, that is 1840, yeah. But in 1840, something happened. That is Queen Elizabeth's great-grandmother, called Queen Victoria. I don't know if some of you have heard of Queen Victoria. That is, when we talk about the Victorian era, she's the one we are talking about. She's Queen Elizabeth's great-grandmother, the late Queen Elizabeth's great-grandmother. In 1840, she wore a white wedding gown in her marriage to Prince Albert. This marriage ceremony, like the royal weddings we see today in England, generated so much hype that in Europe, it started the trend of white wedding gowns again, and it has spread from Europe to other parts of the world as we all know it today. So you see how things are happening. The wedding gown died, and now after 1840 with Queen Victoria, it came back. That is the history or the mystery behind the white wedding gown. Now let's move to the bride's veil. Now with the bride's veil, these two originated in ancient Greece and Rome, where arranged marriages were very common in the society. Now, what is arranged marriage? Arranged marriage, you see, is the type of marriage in which the agreement of marriage is done by the families of the man and the woman, regardless of the interests of that couple. In such marriages, the veil that the bride is covered by, the veil was used as a means to conceal the bride's face until the ceremony was completed and the marriage contract was finalized, you see. So it was used as a means of decoy. This practice aimed to prevent the groom from backing out if he found the bride to be unattractive. Yeah, so the lifting of the veil during this ceremony symbolized the groom's acceptance of his bride, and therefore once you open the veil, you can't go back. Whether she looks good to you or not, you have to take her like that. And later on, the idea of the bride's veil evolved to be used as a way of warding off evil spirits that may want to give bad omens and misfortunes to the woman in her future marital life. That too became a trend that started to be practiced later on. So this wedding veil stuff too evolved with time and has spread from Europe and has become copied by other cultures around the world. Now, in other cultures too, the bride veil was used to symbolize her purity and virginity. This is a very important point. It was used to symbolize the bride's virginity, since I told you that every woman who married in those times were virgins, which unfortunately is sad, but we don't have it quite today. And therefore, as the groom lifts the veil himself, it represents him being the one to access her body, that is his bride's body, for the first time. And so the veil now acted as a code for the hymen of the bride, and you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so that is the story or the mystery behind the bride's veil for you. Now let's talk about bridesmaids, that is the women who accompanied the bride. Now, the tradition of attaching several young women called bridesmaid to the bride in the marriage ceremony too originated in ancient Rome, Europe. And in those days, you see, they didn't have cars like we do today. So the brides had to walk long distances from their houses to where the marriage was taking place while wearing her wedding dress on the way. This posed great danger where she was likely to be kidnapped and held for money, for ransom by bad people, or even kidnapped by people like ex-lovers or other men in the community who might not want the marriage to even occur. And so to prevent this, they would typically send about 7 bridesmaids to accompany the bride while wearing the same dress to look similar to her, in order to disguise her from being pinpointed by the people they come across. But now the trend has evolved to distinguish the bridesmaids from the bride herself, and the focus is more on fashion and aesthetics rather than how it used to be. So that is the story or the mystery behind the bridesmaids for you. And now it's up to you to choose whether you want to stick with this custom or not. Yeah. So now the best man. Now the best man, these two have similar origins. Now it's very interesting. The groom had to also walk from his house to the venue or where the marriage ceremony is taking place. And similarly, like the bride, he stood the danger of being attacked by other men and other people in the community who disfavor his marriage to the woman. And so to keep him safe on the journey, the groom will look through his friends and the strongest and toughest one among them, he selects them, and he uses him as the best man. So he selects him as the best man to protect him and keep him safe. The best man amongst his friends to keep him safe. Yeah. So during the marriage ceremony, this same best man also acts as the one to confront and mitigate any danger or opposition that may arise from the crowd, that is from any opposing crowd member. He is the one to deal with that person, whether there's physical confrontation. And also after the marriage, when the groom is taking the bride to his home, the best man likewise would do his job to protect the couple. So basically he's acting like a bodyguard to the groom and the wife. And sometimes to note, in the case when the bride doesn't support the marriage and wants to run away during the ceremony, the best man is the one to move to action to capture the bride back to finish the process of marriage. Yeah, so that is the bride, the best man for you. Now let's complete this part. I don't want to cross to 30 minutes because I want to keep the download size very short for you to be able to download this part 1 and listen to it at your own convenience. So now let's talk about the honeymoon, and let's complete with the honeymoon. Now the honeymoon has different origins, which is different from the European cultures. The main known origin comes from 1500s, in the medieval periods, 1500s, when the bride's father would prepare a herbal concoction of fermented honey beverage. It was like a beverage which had sweet honey in it, but had some other leaves concoctions in it, and it fermented and became alcoholic. So the bride's father will give this beverage to the couple to drink, but the couple will stay home privately and consume this fermented honey beverage for 1 month, and it is believed to make them fertile, to give them high fertility for their marriage. So honey and moon, you see, honey, moon, and moon here represents month. Honey month, honey moon. So they stay away and they keep up to themselves for 1 month, 30 days, just drinking this concoction to become highly fertile, to give birth. So that's another interesting fact about honeymoon for you. However, there's also another interesting origin of honeymoons, and it's dealt with the situations in those ancient times when some marriages weren't really supported by the community or supported by certain people in the tribes or in the ethnic groups. So typically after the marriage, whether you hold the marriage in secret or not, the word will come out that this so and so person married. And therefore what happens is that some community community people or some people from the tribe might want to capture either the bride or capture the man and take them away to prevent their tribe person or their tribe woman or tribe man from marrying into that tribe. So the period after every marriage was quite dangerous in those times because anything could occur. You'll be living in your house, your matrimonial home with your wife, and all of a sudden you hear the door banging and you go and some people are holding some sticks and clubs coming to carry you go. They are coming to take the bride away from you because they never liked the idea of you marrying from their tribe or allowing their tribe woman or man to marry into a particular tribe when there were, let's say, some conflicts. So after every marriage, typically the couple would separate and isolate themselves in hiding and put them in hiding for 30 days. So that is the honeymoon for you, and I hope you've been able to understand certain mysteries about the customs that we practice in our modern day. And now it's up to you to decide whether you are still going to stick to a practice that didn't originate from your culture as an African or not. It's up to you. And I think you can share your opinion in the comments. For me, I have my own reservations. Yeah, but you are free. Everybody is free to have their own way. So that is that for you. I hope to catch you in the comments where you put your questions or any suggestions on the floor for people to benefit and for myself to also answer you. So in part 2, we are going to consider the mystery of what happens spiritually in the marriage ceremony. That is, during the marriage ceremony, what happens? We see the physical side of things. That is the wedding ring, the gown, the bridesmaid, and all these things. These are the mysteries behind them, their historic origins. Now, in part 2, we go into the spirituality and the spiritual side of things. What happens really in the spiritual realm during the marriage ceremony? That is equally very important. I love you guys and pray for me. I'm not feeling quite too well. Hope to catch you very soon. Love you all. Bye.